What's up everybody, Steve here for Nerdy Inc. coming at you with another episode of our Evolution of an Artist series on Akira Kurosawa. This time we're finally doing the Seven Samurai. So yes, you can put all your swords down, we're finally doing this one. Seven Samurai is the midpoint of Akira Kurosawa's career, and many would say his high point. It was the first of his epics, the longest movie he ever made, featured an ensemble cast of Kurosawa veterans, and featured unparalleled action sequences. The influence of the Seven Samurai is not to be understated. You're going to see its influence on everything from Star Wars to Lord of the Rings and any other big-budget action movie, really, that you've ever seen, ever. As a result, you're probably already familiar with the story. A farming community is tormented by bandits who say they're going to return after the harvest. They set out to hire a band of warriors in order to protect them and collect a ragtag group of samurai who come with their own personal problems. Getting deja vu? Maybe you've seen the western The Magnificent Seven, which is a direct adaptation of Kurosawa's epic. You may also recognize this as the plot of Pixar's 1998 film, A Bug's Life. Again, it's difficult to understate how enormously important Seven Samurai was, not just for cinema as a whole, but Japanese cinema specifically. Despite receiving critical praise and international attention for Rashomon a few years before, most films coming out of Japan were still seen as stuffy, slow, and too artful for a mainstream audience. Seven Samurai changed all of that. It was exciting, fresh, filled with colorful characters and big set pieces, and proved the Japanese could put on a bombastic affair on par with Hollywood's epics. It had everything an audience going to the theater wanted to see: action, romance, humor, and more action. Despite all the international attention, Seven Samurai also remains a very personal evolution for Akira Kurosawa himself. He'd always wanted to make a samurai flick, and had originally toyed with the idea of making a film that followed a day-in-the-life story of a samurai, and eventually that turned into The Seven Samurai. He combined the intense drama found in his previous films like Akira with the spectacle of a big-budget action film to create a movie that actually has meaning and weight behind all of its action sequences. He takes literally half of the movie to introduce his characters, particularly the titular samurai, by showing them in action. Whether they're donning the appearance of a monk to rescue a stolen child, or forging their family history to fight alongside other samurai, the triumph of Kurosawa's epic comes from this careful attention to detail. By the time the action starts ramping up, each character has been given enough reason for us to care about them. This is the single biggest difference between a classic epic action movie and a forgettable blockbuster that gets pumped out every week over the summer. You'll also notice that the way the movie introduces the samurai is very similar to the way many modern movies introduce their titular characters. You'll see them in action doing something before we even get to the main plot, so you understand who they are, what they're about, and how they operate. The action is also downright spectacular. Kurosawa was granted the use of telephoto lenses and multiple cameras, which allowed him to film battle scenes like never before. This aided the editing process, where he was able to cut on an action and pick up from a different angle right where it left off. This gives us flowing, dynamic, and clear action sequences that build tension and keep you on the edge of your seat. Kurosawa is also known for his intricate camera movements, where a shot will often end in a completely different place where it began. He again uses this technique to great effect in Seven Samurai, holding on shots to build tension before cutting and releasing. Also notice the use of weather. This time the rain begins to fall just before the final battle. Sound familiar? The movie's technical innovation isn't just limited to camera movements and editing. Kurosawa fought Toho Studios in order to build the peasant village for real instead of shooting in a studio. Even though this meant there was less control over the environment they were working with, the result is a real, believable village that adds to the realism of the movie. Thanks to the committal of a director to his work, we're left with a film that's definitely going to endure the test of time. You don't have to look very far to find an argument about CG versus practical sets or effects on any internet message board out there, and it's kind of comforting to know that the argument is just about as old as film itself. Seven Samurai was a film that was made to thrill, and still does so to this day. Its 3.5-hour runtime never feels its length thanks to Kurosawa's smart pacing that keeps the narrative moving forward. It paved the way for some of his later epics, but retained the intimate nature of his earlier films. To cap it all off, he leaves us with one of my favorite shots he ever composed, one that encapsulates the grand scale of the events that just transpired, mixing it with a quiet reflection on the sacrifices that were made to get them there. It's a timeless classic, epic in the true sense of the word, and resoundingly influential on everything we favor today, from Game of Thrones to Star Wars. So next time you think about popping in the extended edition of Return of the King, maybe you'll give an old Japanese filmmaker a try instead. And that wraps up our Evolution of an Artist series on Akira Kurosawa for this week. Next week we'll continue into some of his other films post Seven Samurai, but for all things film and Akira Kurosawa related, keep it right here at Nerdy Inc.